Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting to order. Welcome to the February 28th Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272. As the province has lifted some of the COVID-19 restrictions, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. The question period sign-in sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of the question period, the chair will call those who have signed up at the podium to address council. For those in attendance, masks are still mandatory in all indoor settings. Council members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically. However, the following guidelines apply. Members participating electronically must have their video on. If the need to turn the video off, they must advise the chair, as members who have their video off are considered absent. The chair will verbally name members participating electronically. Members who join the meeting electronically must verbally advise the chair they are present and must verbally advise the chair prior to disconnecting from the meeting that they must leave the meeting. Members must clearly state if they are opposed to a vote by raising their hand verbally stating their opposition. Members must remain muted during the meeting until the chair has permitted them to speak. If a member wishes to speak, they must raise their virtual hand and physical hand in order to notify the chair they wish to speak. Members who have stated a conflict of interest will be put in a virtual waiting room for the duration of the item and will be admitted back into the meeting once the item was concluded. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of the late items.
Thank you, Chair. For late items today, agenda item 4A1, introducing the draft city plan. We're adding the PowerPoint presentation titled Reimagined City Plan Document. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you. And see those in attendance in real life and also virtually. We have in attendance Councillor Turley and Councillor Armstrong, briefly.
No. Thanks, Chair. It's Councillor Turley and Councillor Brown.
Councillor Turley and Councillor Brown.
Yeah.
Doing a big wave. I did see Councillor Armstrong on there. Maybe I didn't. So if we could get a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Bonner. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? Adopted. And that brings us to item 4, reports, Reimagine and IMO, and that'll be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Council. Certainly excited to be with you this afternoon and present to you our draft city plan, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Bhopal Singh in a minute. Although it seems to be when we do these events that I often get the privilege of introducing it, but I do want to stress to yourselves and again the community is this is really a collaborative effort across the entire organization, and really anybody who's sitting here at the front table today could have introduced this document, because all of our staffs have had invested a huge, considerable amount of time and energy, and we wanted to acknowledge that work that's gone to get us to this point, and also want to thank the community for the input that they've had to date, and really believe it's resulted in a better draft document. And I think that it's important place, Chairman, to mention we've been through now the first 2 phases. We want to go and launch phase 3, but what we have before you today is a draft plan, and Ms. Bhopal Singh is going to spend a little first part of her presentation talking about what to expect the next 2 months, how we go about getting further input from yourselves, how we go about getting further input from your committees, and ultimately from the community, with the idea of being back in front of you in early May with ultimate direction around how you want to proceed with the associated bylaw. So unless there's any questions from myself, I'll turn it over to Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Okay, good afternoon, Council. So it is with great pleasure that we reach this major milestone for Reimagine Nanaimo, and we have for you in the community a draft city plan. So today I'm going to go through the structure and content of the plan, and before I do that, I'm going to go over the timelines to make sure that the community are aware of the time that we have available to review the draft and provide feedback, and you're also aware of our timelines that we're working with you to provide feedback and revisions to this draft plan. So without further ado, and what I was going to also say is if I can go through the presentation, then take questions after, if that works for everyone. Alongside me, you see all our different GMs in the executive committee who can also help answer questions about different parts of the plan. So without further ado, so this is the front cover, and I'd like to start by saying this looks like a very weighty 300-page document. It is, but it replaces several documents that you see here. Our OCP, our Active Transportation Plan, our Parks, Recreation, Culture Master Plan, and then numerous other documents, just a few of which are stacked here. The other thing I'd like to say to the community as they look at this document, it is very graphic. It is not 300 pages of solid text. What we've attempted to do based on feedback from the community is make this a very graphic document that works not only for people who have more of a technical background, but also for our everyday community members to understand and work with. And so the communication style is through graphics and images, plus solid policies written in text. So with that, I thought I would just quickly run us through our timeline for reviewing this. So we're here today on February 28th at this GPC to go through the meaty part of the plan at a high level, and then letting you know that we're actually starting our informal referrals with different interest groups and stakeholders that we're required to do through any official community plan process, because this document forms that. And then we also have 3 GPCs currently scheduled with you, and you can see on the screen here March 14th, March 28th, and April 11th, covering all the different 5 goals of the plan, as well as land use and neighborhoods. And during that time, we also have an opportunity to look at some of the actions that we want to bring forward to Council that will follow after this plan is adopted for you to consider endorsing in the fall. So with that, on March 1st, engagement with the community starts tomorrow with the online survey and materials, including links to this plan. And then you have until May, when we basically come back with you with an engagement summary, to consider all of the different changes that the community may wish to recommend or what they're telling us they like, hopefully reinforcing that we have hit the mark with what they've told us in phase 1 and 2. And so you can see we're planning at this point a schedule of bringing forward, right towards the end of May, a revised draft with your feedback for first and second reading. So just wanted to make sure that you and the community knew of this timeline. We are certainly not looking for anybody to endorse or adopt this plan today. This is the first draft that's out. And you, as our steering committee, have seen or given us direction on different sections of it. And now we've put together all the meat that goes into this type of policy document. So here we have the table of contents, and for viewers at home, this is where all the different elements of the plan are currently organized, and I'm going to walk us through the different parts of the plan. So with that, very detailed, and the list of figures and tables and schedules are also listed after the content. So we start off with the city plan, looking at why we're doing this, what's the purpose of a city plan, and as I've mentioned, and actually I'll mention now, this plan forms our official community plan that we're required to have under legislation through the Local Government Act. It also forms our Parks, Recreation, Culture Master Plan. It forms our Transportation Master Plan, our Active Mobility Plan, our Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, and it also serves us as our Accessibility and Inclusion Plan based on recent changes to provincial legislation with the BC Accessibility Act that came into force in June of 2021. So that's 6 different plans as well as others that are woven into this very integrated document. So here's where in the beginning we talk about the legislation and why we're doing this. And the other piece on the right-hand side of this slide for viewers at home is we are also part of something called the Regional Growth Strategy, and as part of our role in the Regional District of Nanaimo, along with Parksville, Qualicum, Lanceville, and electoral areas of the RDN, or Regional District of Nanaimo, we have to show how our official community plan and how this document meets the intentions of the Regional Growth Strategy. And the intention of the Regional Growth Strategy is to speak to how we will collaborate with all our partners in the region to achieve a more sustainable community, and that's from environmental perspective, land use management perspective, climate change, a whole range of goals. And so what we've done is in the beginning of the document, created a draft that shows the regional district how we will meet our obligations to them, and it's called the Regional Context Statement, and we're required to do that, again, through the Local Government Act. And so this will be going out to the RDN for their review to see if there's any edits or tweaks we need to that. So one of the things about this plan is it is a very graphic document. The intention is to give readers who like to read through lots of policy the opportunity to do that, and others who prefer more graphic summaries the opportunity to do that too. And once this is online, this is actually searchable, so people can quickly go to the areas they're interested in, and it's also linked. So there's different links, there will be different links on the online version that help people navigate through it. So one of the things Mr. Lindsay mentioned is the tremendous amount of input we received from the community in Phase 1 and Phase 2. And for viewers watching today and tonight, when this is launched through Council, we really hope that some of those same community members, several thousand, who gave input in Phase 1 and 2 will take the time to give us feedback in this phase. We know it's more detailed, we know it's more in-depth, but we really do hope to attract back the people who gave us that feedback and others who maybe are new to the process to confirm and provide feedback on the directions we're going. So reminding everyone that why are we doing this? I mean, we've all seen the census. We are on track for hitting an additional 40,000 people in the next 25 years, and this is why we're planning. We're planning so we don't react, and we are proactive in how we help our community evolve. So this part here is a graphic summary that you've seen before on our housing projections, our demand for industry, commercial, residential, and also institutional. And then the plan is structured, again, in a very visual way, layering the objectives that came through the Nanaimo Donut, the 5 goals that we have drafted resulting from that, and then how the plan is then organized through that. So that's what that's showing. Council has seen this diagram repeatedly, and so the blue again this is our integrated plan that represents all of these documents to my left, with the document to my right, and then it shows how it fits with Council's strategic plans, integrated actions, and other supporting documents. And also importantly, one thing Council told us was monitoring as a key part of this process. So you'll see 2 documents here, and the integrated action plan, sections of which will be coming to you through the different GPCs starting on March 14th, is a good complementary document that will get updated on a regular basis and endorsed by Council, unlike the city plan that is the overall framework that gets adopted by bylaw by Council. And so you've all seen the framework, the Nanaimo Donut, which basically is, for viewers out there, one way of addressing and looking at sustainability that we have adapted for our purposes. And here we have our 5 city goals, and when we do engagement, the engagement we got came back in 12 community input themes. Our community aren't giving us feedback under specific goals. So we are going back out to them to say, okay, you told us based on these 12 themes what's important to you, and we're going to tell you how we've addressed that. And so you'll see when you see the engagement materials online tomorrow that they're structured around the 12 themes and showing the community how have we responded to them on the things that are interesting or that are priorities for them. So for example, if it is access to nature and outdoor recreation or waterfront identity, which parts of the plan speak to the things that were important to them. So starting with goal 1, we have a green Nanaimo, resilient and regenerative ecosystems, and there you can see the different subtopics underneath that the plan is currently organized by. I'm not going to go through them in detail because I have a feeling that if you have questions, you'll direct me to them. The top one there is greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and official community plans in BC are required to set a target for greenhouse gas reduction in their official community plans. So we have done that in this document, reflecting direction from council that you've already made motions on. And then we also have other pieces around climate adaptation, hazard management, and then woven in there is our water, sewer, stormwater, healthy watersheds. And after telling you I wasn't going to run through them all, here I am. And then a few other pieces there that we've captured under the green and resilient. Now, one of the things when we were doing this plan is we found there are so many elements that could fit in more than one goal. And so what we are doing is, because there's 1,000 different ways of organizing this document, this is the way that it made sense to us on this draft, and we may get feedback to reorganize it a bit differently. However, what we've done is shown links within the document, so if you're interested in healthy watersheds, and it also links to another part of the plan, that there's an icon linking you through the document. The second goal is equitable access and mobility, looking at what we're trying to do, having complete communities where people have the opportunity to meet their daily needs, their employment needs, their education needs, all in a way that allows them to connect with our community, both the communities they live in, the neighborhoods, and the urban centers in between. So that's that section there. We have community well-being and livability. Top concern for our community was affordable housing. And throughout the pandemic, we have seen that become more of a challenge for people. And so we are hoping that the policies we have speak to the increasing priority that has for our community. Other ones are intergenerational living. You've endorsed an age-friendly Nanaimo plan. We've integrated elements of that into this document. Food security, community safety and well-being, emergency management, and recreation, culture, and wellness. And that in there represents that kind of shift to really looking at how we as the local government influence the community's well-being through our land uses and the services we provide. Then section 4 is an empowered Nanaimo, where we deal with reconciliation, representation, and inclusion. And for those of you who were watching or here on February 14th, we presented on this aspect of the plan to you and explained how this plan actually helps us meet our requirements for accessibility and inclusion. So again, you'll see the list of different subtopics under there. And then, let's see, just trying to get me to the next slide. Just wondering, does anybody know where I should be pointing this to get it to move forward? Callista? My clicker's not advancing. Ah, thank you. And then last but not least is a prosperous Nanaimo, looking at a thriving and resilient economy. So looking at our economic, human, social, and environmental capital, our business development, innovation and technology, placemaking, investment attraction, and tourism. So these are the 5 key goals that are in section C of the community, of the plan, the draft city plan. And then part D, one of the things that it's important for the community to remember is this is our land use plan. So in part D, it shows the layers and the structure of how this document forms our land use plan and guides us into the future. So the first one is dealing with growth management. I mentioned our relationship with the Regional District of Nanaimo. And one of the things I should stress is that as part of our agreement with the Regional Growth Strategy is that Nanaimo is the primary focus point for the majority of urban growth for the region. And as such, we play a really important role by absorbing most of the future growth and development in our region in helping protect the watersheds, the resource lands, and all the other rural attributes of our whole entire region. So we play a really important role in that. And as part of that, this map here shows our growth containment boundary that aligns with our city boundary, and also shows something called an urban containment boundary that we maintain within that, where lands inside are where we want to focus growth, and lands outside that people will see on the hatched areas are areas where growth is to be limited to protect environmental, agricultural, and other more natural and resource values. So also in the plan, we talk about a blue and green network, and this is a different way of presenting and framing how we understand our how our ecosystem as a city works to support our watersheds, our management of rainwater, and our infrastructure. And so here you see a linkage between the watersheds and catchment areas of different rivers, our different green spaces, and how that works for us in terms of city infrastructure and services. Now, in terms of the land use plan, this is a really key part for the community, and those who will look at the land use map, we provide a summary table of the different land use designations. So for the majority of our city, we have a lot of areas that are known as neighborhoods, and that's on the next page there, onto the right-hand column. But what's of key importance is that the downtown is designated as a primary urban center where we want the majority of our future growth, our cultural, our different recreational amenities, our waterfront focus there. And then we have 6 secondary urban centers stretching from Woodgrove in the north down to Chase River in the south. And in this table, you've got a summary of what the intention is for the land uses in each of these designations and how they differ. One thing I'd like to also note is that in neighborhoods, we have neighborhood centers, which are little areas designated focusing at or near school sites or other recreational facilities where there's opportunities for neighborhoods to have a small amount of neighborhood serving services. Now, a key thing for Nanaimo, for those of you who know that Nanaimo grew from one downtown core to absorb several improvement districts and become very long and linear, is mixed-use corridors. And back in earlier versions of the official community plan, to acknowledge this type of layout of the city, the concept of having corridors, which are arterials that connect between the urban centers, is a really important concept. So I'm aware that council is quite familiar with that, but for some of the community, they may wonder what is a corridor, and that's essentially, it is a mobility or transportation route connecting between different key points in our city and our centers. So the plan also gives a summary of the intended density of the different land uses. I would like to emphasize to the community, these are not for individual sites, these are for the area collectively. So think of it as an average target that we're trying to maintain to achieve the goals that we want for our community in different areas. So then in part 5, we've got the mobility network and a really good graphic that shows the hierarchy of mobility modes, walking and rolling. As we have an aging community, not everyone is making their way on cycling. Many people are having to leave their cars and use alternative ways of accessing. Rolling also speaks to youth, of course, who may use skateboards and other means of getting around. And that shows you the connection to the land use priorities there. And this is a really important piece because this piece represents the transportation master plan and how that is closely integrated with land use. So this is a really strong part of our plan, this integration between land use and transportation. And here we have a map that shows not only our active mobility and transportation, it also shows our key transit routes, particularly the ones that we know that will stay and sustain for the next 10, 15 years as the more rapid routes, and really showing how those transit exchanges align with our growth centers. Here's our major road network. Again, this is very common in most official community plan documents, showing the hierarchy of major and local roads and proposed future ones. Then another major section of the plan is its parks, recreation, culture, and wellness. And integrating into the document are, for the first time, this map in official community plan is actually a really helpful one for the community to show where our existing recreational, cultural, and wellness facilities, and where are the proposed future ones. So a future one I might point to is in the south, in the Chase River area, where council has endorsed doing a feasibility study to look at a recreational facility in that area. So again, for the community looking through, they can look at the map and they can see for their areas what they can expect in terms of future land uses and also different services and amenities. So Part E is a really important piece. This is about taking action. And this is where we discuss things like area plans. So we have currently the hospital area plan. We have other area plans like for the waterfront, and explains what the intention is for these area plans that form part of this draft city plan. And then it also talks about neighborhood engagement. So an important piece of this document is to understand that with our direction for the majority of growth to happen in urban centers, not in neighborhoods and lower density areas, the focus for future planning is on framing out those areas in more detail so that we can ensure we get the type of growth we want there. And then in terms of neighborhood plans, they remain as supporting documents sitting outside of the city plan, but still forming an important role, and then focusing on neighborhood engagement and priority setting. And in that section, there are policies around councils or direction to meet annually with the neighborhoods to hear their priorities and concerns and use that to inform council decision-making about priorities across the city in different neighborhoods. So this map here shows where there are existing neighborhood plans currently. And as you can see, the majority of the city does not have detailed neighborhood plans, and many of those that we do have, some of them are getting to be 20 and 30 years old. But we have some good policies in there that talk about how we will engage with neighborhoods going forward and what the desired outcomes are. Then we have section 2, which is looking at bylaws and permits, talking about temporary use permits, which are permits that can be permitted by council for 3 years and then up to renewal of 6 for something that doesn't require rezoning but allows for trying out a land use designation in an area. So this is a very common permit that helps councils look at considering new uses in different areas. We also have development approval information areas that allow us to request more information on specific projects that may have different impacts on the city. And then another important area is our development permits. And so what we've done with this document is we are providing, under the Local Government Act, ongoing development permit areas to protect the environment, and we've added a few additional ones around sea level rise and abandoned mine working hazards, and those are good shifts to accommodate the direction that we've got from you in this plan, and also new technical information that supports letting the community know what our expectations are to protect both the environment and the community from harm. And so the details for this, what we're doing in this draft, is we are pulling out the regulations and putting it into the zoning bylaw where it makes sense for developers to see that in one place, and then providing the rationale through the Local Government Act for why we have these development permits in the draft document. This also includes heritage conservation areas as well, and that's a continuation from the existing official community plan. So then we have an overview of some of the financial mechanisms. So again, the community and developers know what they can expect around contributions that help us achieve what we want as the community evolves and different opportunities come up through development. And then a key part of the document, and throughout the whole document, you'll find policies that speak to partnerships, whether it's partnerships with our First Nations, the school district, other levels of government, nonprofits, and then we speak to it specifically in this section as well, because it's so critical to us achieving this plan. Many aspects of the plan require relationships and partnerships for us to fully implement, and part of those relationships are also with our community. So in terms of implementation, council were very clear with us. They wanted to see a monitoring plan. We went through an exercise and a workshop with you fairly early on to look at targets and indicators. That work will be brought forward and back to you after this document is adopted. and we will have a framework in place for regularly monitoring, reviewing, and updating the plan. And then at the end of the document, we talk about how you go about amending the plan, which is in our current OCP, but important for the community to know what the expectations are should they wish to amend the plan. So with that, I will wrap up and see if you have any questions. And again, reminding you, this is our timeline here. And with that, I will pause.
Thank you very much. Looks like a incredible amount of work, and thank you for that presentation, and open it up here to council for questions. Director or Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate this. It's work of art. Well, certainly, and the presentation that you showed us here is not exactly the same as on the website. There's some, and I think all the content is there. It's just that some of the images and some of the content that's on the page isn't actually matching what's in our agenda. So I maybe want to update the website with that, with yours, because yours has got more in it. I do have some questions about the, when I first looked at it and started going through the various sectors, and having been on the Environment Committee, I knew that we had made in December, had made a number of motions, and I don't really see those articulated in here, and I just wondered when they were going to get in there and how that process was going to take place.
Okay, thank you through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So one of the things that we're doing on March 9th is coming back to you with a table of those motions and how and where they're addressed in the city plan, and an opportunity for the Environment Committee to see where things may have been missed. And one thing I will say, this is a huge document. It's quite unwieldy. Even as we're looking at it every day, we're seeing things that may have shifted or need to be tweaked. So coming back to we're coming to the Environment Committee on March 9th, and we'll have a table of those motions and where within the document they've been addressed and where there may be opportunities to refine and add, because that's a very important point.
So I guess my question here is, now that the public knows that we're starting our engagement process, are they going to be engaging on this without the motion wordings? Because there's a bit of this, because I think as we go through this process, it gets harder and harder to make changes as the thing gets more ground in stone. So if they're engaging on what's in here and not on the motions that are eventually going to get in here, there may be a bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what we can do is talk to consultants and see if there's a way to provide an additional process for that. At this point in time, what we did struggle with, well, not struggle with, is our survey takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And as you can imagine, there's no way that 15 to 20 minutes covers the depth of this. So what it does is it goes through some of the high level pieces and then gives the community an opportunity to comment. However, there is the opportunity to go through the whole document online and I'll speak to this more this afternoon, and provide actual comments on sections. So there is opportunity to see if we have missed things for the community to comment on that, and for us to bring that back and bring that back to council to see what it is that we've not hit the target on.
And I guess my question here is, how do we make sure that we've covered all our bases here? Like, you're coming back to us March 9th, you're going to show us documents, all the motions. How do we know we didn't miss something there? Like, I mean, it's part of a hard question to answer, but I mean, how do you know what you don't know?
Okay, I guess what we can do clearly is take the motions and in a table show which sections of the document where they might be sitting, or where they need to be strengthened, or where they're missing. So that's, I think, fairly clear. Maybe what I'm hearing is there anything else that we don't know that we might have missed on top of that? With the motions, I think it'll be fairly clear, but if there's other additional pieces.
Well, as an example, I know that we're missing some in C11 and all the way there, because I was at the Environment Committee when we made those motions. So soon as I read it, I know, okay, that's not what we said. And that's not what council agreed to. So, but I don't necessarily sit on the advisory committee on accessibility and mobility and inclusivity. So I don't necessarily remember what they've done
Right.
to be in there.
So we are meeting with them on March 23rd. And so we'll be going through this document with them at the same time on the accessibility inclusion policies, and going back and saying, okay, this is what you told us, this is what we've done, and framing it that way. So that would be the way we would address that with them
Okay.
in a similar manner. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think Ms. Gurry's got a comment as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So for motions that were made at the Environment Committee and then therefore were part of the consent items at council meeting and passed, those would be more items that have been missed and being brought to the attention. We'll incorporate those into the drafts as they progress through the feedback and changes that are made. So a motion for that specific omission wouldn't be required, but as the process goes forward, should the committee have suggestions or discuss changes of substance or of, that aren't just editorials, like edits, that would be time to have that motion and discussion and direction to staff. But for the specific motions you're speaking of, Councillor Bonner, those are omissions that you could just make us aware of, and because they've already passed council, they would be edited in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner, and part of our job as elected officials to make sure that nothing's missed, and it sounds like you've been doing your job, so thank you for raising that. Got Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. Testing. That's all right. There we go. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. Through you, first of all, of course, thank you, Ms. Bhopal Singh and staff, everybody for the work that's gone into this draft. It's a huge amount of work, and it's very impressive. And I'm really excited that we're ready, just about, to give this to the public for the next stage, and I'll be very interested in the feedback that we receive. I personally don't agree with everything that's in the draft, but we're not here to talk about my pet peeves or projects or anybody else's. We'll see what the public thinks. But I did want to make one comment beyond a thank you, and that is this, Ms. Bhopal Singh, as I read through quickly, scanned through, I noticed a lot of our goal statements involved action words such as ensure, the city will ensure, the city will support, the city will prioritize, will encourage, will consider, will provide. And some of those are fairly strong words. And I just want, I guess, the public to have realistic expectations that we can't do everything for everybody. And there are always constraints to what we can do or should do. So yes, this is sort of a set of ideals that we might want to strive towards, but we're not going to be able to provide everything that everybody wants. That they might read one of these goal statements and say, well, this is supposed to be a priority. Why aren't you doing it? Oh, this is supposed to be a priority. You said you'd support this. Why aren't you supporting us? You see what I'm saying? So I understand the language, but I just want people to be aware that it's not a blanket acceptance of every possible project that's going to come before us. So I would like to just note that qualm that I have, the difference between what is ideal and what is the restraints of reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, that is something that we can certainly emphasize as we are out in the community. And I think it's one of the things when you look at the turquoise orange and you see council's strategic plans and then the actions, and that you cannot achieve everything every year. You have to set priorities both geographically and then project-wise. So that's something we can certainly look at, making sure that we are covering in our communications.
Great. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. And this brings us to Councillor Turley. And I think you've got to press the button, Councillor Turley, not me on this one.
Now we got it. Okay.
Nailed
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment, first of all, to thank Lisa and all the staff that worked very hard on developing this to this stage. However, I think it's key to remember that the word draft is stamped all over it, which means it's not cast in stone. And in my experience in the business community is any plans or documents along those lines are always considered to be moving or changing documents. They're never static. You don't want to, standing still is usually going behind. So I think we need to understand that there has to be room for changes, and things that Councillor Bonner brought up could well be some of those changes. So I don't think it's the right thing right now to be saying, well, why isn't this in there? Why isn't that in there? Because these are all things that will be considered at a future date and added to the plan if the community and the council of the day deems that it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. And got Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I don't have much to say. I think it's an incredible plan. I can see 2.5 years of work into this already. And thank you to the citizens of Nanaimo, to all the staff and all the workshops and all the Zoom meetings and our not-for-profit organizations and the chamber. There's been a lot of engagement in this, but it is a guide for our future. It states it's a guide for our future. I don't look at it as making promises. I look at it as it leading the road for 2046, I think is our target. So well done, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And we've got Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I think it's important to get clarity on process here a little bit. So this is a preliminary first cut draft of this document that is available. Council itself will be going through workshops through the Governance Priorities Committee. Additional ones could be set as time goes along. You may need more time later on to work through wording of the policies and allow for the feedback to be accumulated through the public engagement process, which will then be reported out to you. So you will as well have the opportunity to wordsmith and address some of those policies, leading to a final draft, which would be put together, I think, on the slide in May, and that is the document that will go to public hearing. So between now and then, I don't think you'll have a series of drafts. You probably only have one that ultimately comes out of all this process. So there'll have to be a tallying up of all those things. So I just want to make sure you're clear on that. We're not going to have a series of drafts unless that becomes part of the process. The anticipation is this is a draft. It will go then to the various committees, agencies, as well as the general public for preliminary comment. Ideally, most of their concerns will be addressed through this engagement process in the next 6 weeks. And then when a document is presented for public hearing, we're hopeful that most of those serious issues and concerns have been addressed, and that you will have a document before you on June 23rd that you are comfortable with and the majority of the community is. That is the aspirational goal with this process. So over the next while, it's really important that everybody rolls up their sleeves and takes the time to work through it. So today it's just putting it on the table. There's lots of chance for working through it at the council. You're the steering committee of this. You will have the chance to fine tune this the way you see fit and guide the process ultimately. But the goal is to get through something that gets a draft plan revised for public hearing, and that I think was later in May is the date that's being suggested there. It is a tremendous piece of work, and it's a large body of work, and there's going to be even more material supplied to you through the action plan. So it's just a matter, okay, now we know we have all this stuff. Where's our comfort level, and what do we understand we're doing? And the only other thing I'd say is the action plans. This is the adopted document. The action plans work plans will be scripted out on separately and won't be adopted by bylaw. So there'll be a lot more latitude going forward to go through those and build them into work plans for every year, actually. So I suspect they'll be forming part of the annual budget process and that type of thing. So anyway, I just wanted myself congratulate the team for all the effort. And there's just no way you can get it perfect on the first cut. But I think there'll be a lot of eyes on this, and hopefully it will all mold into a document that you're comfortable forwarding to public hearing. So that will be your call sometime in May. Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph, and got Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair, again. One of the things I really like with this job is the ability to come here and have all different kinds of ideas and discussion. And I was sitting here, and Councillor Thorpe started up about the question of the wording of some of the words. And I said, oh, he's latched onto something I'm thinking about. And then he said that they're too strong. And I said, well, no, I don't think they're strong enough, right? And not every single word by any means, but I do believe that there are some things where we don't necessarily like support the idea of, like, what does that mean? And because the minute you write it and you say you're supporting the idea, you've already fulfilled it because you've done it. You've supported the idea. It doesn't mean you actually finished it. Doesn't mean you actually completed it. Doesn't mean that you actually hit a goal. And so I would be looking for some more stronger language on some things and going forward, so that when people read this and who may be wanting to move here or are here, and they say, okay, that city is going to be doing this, right? And they're going to have this done by, X amount of time or something like that. So to me, it tells me yes, it's important that we're supporting certain things, but certain things need to get done. And we should be saying that in our plan. It says, we will be doing this, right? So that's just my thing. And certainly I thank Mr. Rudolph for giving us that time frame. Since we're already kind of 2 weeks behind our original idea of launching this, do we have like a plan B timeline in case something else happens?
Well, thank you for the question. I do. So I think our plan B right now is I think the goal is in order to complete this before summer, have a public hearing before summer, we've given you the best shot at a time frame. So I don't believe, because I think you've made up the extra 2 weeks through the process in May. I do think that the original was a little tighter, so that we've pushed it out. And if there are challenges, even as a result of the public hearing, there is a mechanism to rescind and do some final edits in the first council meeting in July, and then come back and finish the job at that time. So that is the plan B right now. If it's more significant, then I think through the process you're going to have to determine whether there's another plan B. But that is the plan B right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Crowe, you're mic'd.
Thank you very much, Chair. Never hurts to repeat a thank you, and so I'm going to repeat thank you to everyone who's worked on this, and Ms. Bhopal Singh in particular for her leadership on this project, and everyone on staff and all the city folks who have worked on it, the citizens of Nanaimo. I'm going to pick up on a word that the CAO just used a few minutes ago, and that is aspirational. For me, that's what this document is. This isn't necessarily a roadmap to perfection, but it includes the aspirations of a whole range of citizens who have let the city know what their concerns are, what they think is important, and how they want to get there. I think Ms. Bhopal Singh started off very wisely today by holding up the various documents that exist already in this city and basically said, it's I wouldn't say it's akin to the Bible, but you've taken a bunch of books and you've put them all together in one place, and you've hopefully made them coherent and given a vision for what I suspect some in the city will not see as their ideal city. but certainly it will be ideal in the sense for me that it includes a lot of people and what they want to see. With respect to Councillor Thorpe's, I won't call it criticism, but comments around the use of the words encourage and support and whatnot, inevitably I think it has to be that. And just a very simple example, just go to page 97, intergenerational living. Talks about encourage and support an integrated service delivery approach all across levels of government, community organizations to meet the needs of children and youth, including those with higher vulnerabilities and special education needs. Support the integration of childcare spaces at elementary school sites across the city. We're not going to determine if the school district decides to incorporate or integrate childcare spaces at elementary school sites. We don't have control over those areas under provincial jurisdiction. But in terms of being able to say, if you have someone who has a comprehensive view, and surely it should be the city of what kind of city we want, then our job is to do what we can in the jurisdiction that we have the ability to do something, and then to encourage or ask for the support or whatever else we may be doing. If it's like I said the other night about the Bowers project. I'm not convinced it will be built according to the lovely drawings we saw or built out perfectly, but if it was, many would say, gee, that's the kind of community I'd love to live in, with green space and paths and bike paths and connectivity and places to work and all of those things. And for me, that's what this document represents. As I say, I appreciate that when the rubber hits the road, where we will be, though, is within our jurisdiction and our ability to actually do something. That's where I think Councillor Thorpe's remarks are cogent and applicable, because it'll be about the priorities. We have made a pretty firm commitment in this around the waterfront walkway, for instance, and that is something that is within our jurisdiction, subject to working with, obviously, our friends at Snuneymuxw First Nation. But that is something we can do. We can work with the provincial government when it comes to grants around fields for recreation. But stepping back from this, I would like to think that for those people in our community, and I see a couple of them have written already, they've obviously looked at it, particularly around arts and culture. I notice, I won't mention the individual's name, but trust his sharp eye to figure it out, and I think that gentleman knows who he is, and I won't either embarrass him or praise him by mentioning, but he talks about, you know, public spaces that the city would own that would allow for artists to have a place to work. I just think this is a pretty impressive document, and I suspect the ultimate compliment will be that a number of other communities may skip some of the process and come and look at what Nanaimo's done here in this draft and copy it, and it is the sincerest form of flattery imitation. So from my perspective, on a positive note, I just want to repeat the thank you and say that I think it hits the right tone. It recognizes that we cannot do everything in this to create our ideal city, because we'll be reliant on federal and provincial governments and the private sector and the nonprofit sector to help bring all of this about. But in so much as it represents the kind of place that anyone in an urban environment would want to have, this is it. So thank you. Forgive the long speechifying, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and someday when I'll figure out how to make this thing work, so get my little green thing up there.
Thank you, Mayor Krogh. Not seeing any other comments. A few comments. One, thank you for all the work that's gone into it thus far. In going through it, I definitely can appreciate and see sort of the care taken to sort of have a coherent whole and a sound sort of rationale and logical basis for how it's set up. And I think that the exercise, even to get to this point of integrating and bringing in all the different city policies, it is going to pay off. And I really like the direction that it has gone in so far. And I think that it, with tweaking, we'll have a product that we're proud of. I've got a few questions and some comments like around languaging and that. The first is just tying it into the monitoring program and also just the city goals. There are, in each of the section, in the city donut, there is a section kind of on outcomes. And I think, in the first read of it, I think that we could put more focus on clarity of outcomes, because when I think of this as a useful tool for city councilor and as a policy document, that being really clear on our goals then sets what policies that we have placed, even if it's at higher level policies, and then those action plans follow from that. And so, as an example, I was looking at the tree canopy, and one of the outcomes was to increase the tree canopy. And I think it comes back to a bit of conversation, that Councillor Thorpe brought up and Councillor Bonner, is like, when we say increase tree canopy, is it by 2 trees, because that we'd be successful according to the words, or is it by 10%, or are we trying to attain a certain level of tree cover within neighborhoods? Because some, go to Protection Island and there's more trees than you can handle, but in other neighborhoods it's not there. And so I think understanding what we're trying to achieve, and I think that can be applied to many other sections. There's one around in zero waste, and there's a conversation that was had at the Environment Committee around eliminating organic waste going to landfill by 2030. That's a very definite goal, and would direct very clear policy, whereas if we change that and say support eliminating organic waste, that really leaves it open to the degree of urgency or the aggressiveness of policies or what we're doing. And I know there's a conversation around, okay, organic diversion, there's jurisdiction within the regional district, there's provincial jurisdiction, and there's also stuff that we can do. And I think for each goal, it becomes a very complex conversation around how much jurisdiction we have, what's the urgency, what's the specificity. But I think that if we don't look at those goals through that lens and modify where needed, I think that, our official community plan can risk not providing the direction that's needed for those policies. And that's just sort of one thing that came up for me. And so I think that it would be useful to be able to go through those sections. And a question to staff is just, in terms of the monitoring plan, how closely is that going to be tied into those outcomes that are being outlined within each of those sections for the policy areas?
Okay, through the chair. Sorry, I find this microphone a little difficult because I'm short.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? So one of the things that's important for us to connect is the integrated actions. And so in terms of specific outcomes, the integrated action plans give a chance to look at how to implement the policies and set specific actions that work towards it. With the monitoring plan, that's where we went through an exercise with council in a workshop, I think just about almost exactly close to a year ago, where we looked at what are the targets we want to attain. So while we might have a broad goal in the draft city plan, I'll use the example, eliminating zero waste, in the targets and indicators, we have the opportunity to set what does that look like over what time frame and what's the specific number. And then in your actions, you look at your actions that work you towards that. And then you start putting details. And that's where then council, in turn, has a chance annually or every 2 years to look at your strategic plan and your budgeting and say, okay, of all the priorities we have in this plan, this is what we want to achieve, and here's the actual specific actions we're going to take. By having the actions in a document that you review regularly, you can actually tweak it and say, gosh, well, we put this much investment here, but it didn't actually result in that type of outcome that we wanted. Maybe we should shift our investment and try this approach, and you keep that flexibility there. And then you can look at, as you monitor, how that informs your actions and how you need to change them and maybe realign your investments. So that's the intent of how the documents are intended to work together. So I don't know if that helps at all.
A little bit, yeah. I guess
Yeah.
I think tying the monitoring plan to the official community plan, the outcomes outlined in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is a point of discussion in just terms of like ultimately to create a document that we want that can support us being successful as possible and can be a tool of accountability so that council and the community knows what the policies are, what the goals are, and can ensure, you know, when development applications are coming forward that we're clear on what we're trying to achieve and how we've said we're going to do it. The specificity of the goal, what determines what goes in the official community plan? Or are we going to have all our goals written on this monitoring plan, and that is going to be sort of what will get reviewed annually, and say if we have a dashboard on what the donut goals are, that will be presented, you know, every couple of years to the council to review. I'm just kind of curious on how clear we do need to make those goals in the official community plan compared to the monitoring plan.
I think you're looking at the same goal that you're taking, and you're putting the detail in it. So I'm now wishing that we had a graphic where we'd taken the donut, we'd taken one element of one of the goals, broken it down into here's a policy and here's some actions to get us there, and here are the measures that will show us our progress towards it. So we've done a lot of that work through your help with that workshop about a year ago. And then once we have an endorsed document, we can go back and say, have we missed anything in terms of that? But what I see is us taking the goals that we have, and yes, some of the goals are high level. Then we have the more detailed policies, and then taking the policies and then saying, okay, so for example, if we go back to, say, increasing tree canopy or the zero waste, then saying, okay, what are the specific actions that we want to invest in to make achieving 50% towards eliminating or increasing our tree coverage by this date. And you start putting those details down in your monitoring plan and tailor your actions accordingly. And perhaps it's difficult because I can see the graphic in my head of the layering of how we're taking the draft city plan and its goals and policies, and then actions, and then the targets that you want to achieve, those actions to help you achieve, and the indicator to monitor it. So with, you know, zero waste, you have a very tangible monitoring amount that we get from the regional district on the amount of organic waste going into the landfill, going down over time. So I'm thinking this is something we need to come back with you and show you graphically so you can see how that connects, and perhaps a bit of a refresh on what we did at the workshop a year ago. Because we made a lot of progress. Oftentimes that work is done at the end of a planning process like this, and instead we actually did it quite up front with the donut or the integration of monitoring that way. So through the chair, I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. And then just the other comment on language, I think it would be worthwhile, I mean, and maybe this is how we can step it. I'm just thinking of like how we can, as a committee, get feedback from council on specific policy areas, because I think there's some policy areas where we might have a bit more of a definite idea of the goal and what we need to achieve in 10 years, and that language will be reflected in there, and it may then reflect in a bit more concrete and sure language in the policies. So instead of like discourage, we might be very clear what we're trying to do, and it might turn out that it's worthwhile to have that as prohibit, or just depending on what it is. And I think that there's a few areas where we probably just need to have, because I think they're ultimately a political discussion and where we want to land on that, and I think understanding then how it's going to be operationalized. And so I'm not sure as a committee, you know, should we just go through kind of each of the policy areas sort of chunk by chunk, and as if there's feedback or discussion on that, council members can bring forward recommendations and if it requires a discussion and a vote to have that.
So I was going to say through the chair to the chair, but that didn't quite make sense. So you have the opportunity, I guess, starting with the GPCs March 14th, to start looking at those sections in more depth and letting us know which you wish to see edits or tweaks to. We are hoping that a portion of that time we can also introduce the related actions, but you do have that time set aside on those 3 GPCs, and should there be need for more, we should look at trying to schedule those as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one last comment, just I really appreciated the map layerings of the different lenses, like the blue-green and parks and mobility. I think that really helps sort of visualize and understand how the policies, get overlaid into the actual physical structure of the city, and I think that is a useful tool for the community to understand how this all works. So no other points brought up by council. I'm not seeing anybody's hands raised. So that brings us to question period.
Just having a quick
Mr.
look.
Chair, I was just wondering if Lisa could reiterate again the process. Like tonight, there's going to be a launch, and then tomorrow something's going live on the website. Just those steps, because there's going to be a bit of a repetition in this evening's session. So just so you're clear on what's happening, that's probably not a bad idea.
Thank you. So tonight, what you can expect is we're not going to cover quite the same ground. We're going to let the community know about the plan. We're not going to go through the same exact PowerPoint, but what we're going to do is focus on encouraging them to engage with us, give a quick overview of the ways they can engage starting tomorrow with an online survey, something called a story map, which is a way of interacting in a more user-friendly way to provide information and explaining to the community where they have the opportunities to engage and really encouraging that engagement. And then letting them know the time period. So this, I feel like I'm actually going to give you the presentation now, so I'll pause there. So that will be tonight at the GPC, at your regular council meeting. And then we will also be looking at having updates on our website through the Get Involved platform with different aspects, highlighting different aspects of the plan every other week, so that the community who are interested in one section in particular can kind of focus on that area. One thing I would like to take the opportunity to say is, and I was reminded of this yesterday around the word plan or plans. And at one point when we started this process with your guidance, we actually didn't know if we would have one fully integrated plan or an official community plan plus maybe a couple others that segued with it. So we've wound up with one document, and that is quite the undertaking. And I do know, and I think that's the thing, sometimes you're reminded of doing something different when you have some colleagues at the province saying, we're keeping tabs on you because we've never seen anybody do anything quite like this. They've seen communities attempt to do things in sync, but not integrate their feedback on several different elements of city planning all in one process, and then integrate 3-4 very hefty documents like a Parks, Recreation and Culture Plan and a Transportation Master Plan, and then climate change as well, all into one document. So it's a reminder that this was a bit of an experiment that we were starting off with, not showing quite exactly what the end product was going to look like for you. And so sometimes I feel like taking a big deep breath, going, ah. So that was an interesting one yesterday, looking at some wording around plan versus plans. And so, hopefully what we've tried to do is for the wider community who, instead of having to bounce between 3 or 4 different documents, can see in one place what they can expect for the future of their city. And then for those wishing to invest in our community, providing a unified vision in one place, again, where they've got our song sheet that we wish them to work with us on. So that's what we're aiming for with the final product, and hopefully with everybody's input, we get there. No, thank you.
Great. Moved by Councillor Martman, seconded by Councillor Bonner. All in favor? Adjourned. Thank you.